You're listening to Critical Mass Radio. Now, it's our turn.
Good evening. This is Sunday evening, 6 o'clock in the UK. Hello, everybody. It's criticalmassradio.co.uk. Please join the chat room because we've got Joe Burns coming up, the Irish Referendum, Vote No campaign. And later on, we've got comments from Maggie Tuttle, children's campaigner and grandmother. So to start us off, we'll play the show intro and we'll get back to you all shortly. Get your cups of teas ready and your questions because we're ready to go.
Chemtrails, child, animal and planet abuse, geoengineering, alternative energy, disclosure, prison planets, Agenda 21, drones, biometrics. This is CMR, Critical Mass Radio, leading the way to stopping the control with proactive hosts, shows and solutions, and informative groundbreaking guests. Critical Mass Radio, the People's Station. Now, it's our turn.
Yeah, good evening. It's the Afternoons Rebel Show with me, Andy Peacher and Kevin Bull. Please join us in the chat room at www.criticalmassradio.co.uk, where you'll find a donation button where every donation is greatly appreciated by the station managers. Tonight we're talking with Joe Burns regarding the Irish referendum no vote, and we'll bring him on shortly. But could I just mention one little thing that I support, and that's a Facebook page called Church of England. That's a Facebook page called Church of England, and it's basically Save the Lewis and Ryan Freeman campaign, a local family down in Lincolnshire that we all need to support as brothers, sisters and caring people. But getting on with the show now, we have Kevin Bull. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Andy.
Hello.
Going again. We're fortunate to have Joe Burns on, who I'm sure is going to enlighten us a lot more on the serious implications of the Irish referendum on the rights of the child.
Yeah, good evening, Joe.
Hi, good evening, gentlemen. How are you?
Cool.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Joe. Please enlighten us on the serious nature of this vote on the referendum and what the implications will be for citizens and families in Ireland, and of course for the rest of us as well, because this is the last bastion for the rights of the child through the family, isn't it, really, Joe?
Well, to put it down into maybe one sentence, it's about parents handing over their rights to decide best interests for their children. That once this is passed, you no longer have the right to decide best interests for your children. The state can step in, decide to do whatever it wants, and you have absolutely no say in the matter. In the UK, to a very large extent, that's already the case. There are, for example, I was telling you last week about a story about councils going around to schools and giving girls of any age contraceptive implants, because this is one of the rights under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. There are several rights and they're interpreted different in different countries. But what's different in Ireland is that Ireland has a constitution, which means that any treaty or convention that we sign, such as the UNCRC, which is actually a human rights treaty, anything that we sign must be compatible with the Constitution. And what happened was in 2006, every 3 years or 5 years, I think it is, governments go to the UN and they get their report card on human rights, and then they go and try and defend it. And Ireland was told in 2006 that they would need to change Article 42.5 of the Constitution to basically take away parents' rights so that the UN can do, they've carte blanche to do whatever they want. If they want to stop homeschooling, if they want to vaccinate every child in Ireland, if they want to give contraceptives to 13-year-olds, which they currently can't do because children in Ireland under the law can make medical decisions for themselves at 16. So if you look at the case of contraception, what happens is a girl of 16, she has reached the age of consent, so she can decide for herself to put herself on the pill. But what happens when you turn off parents' rights to decide best interests? This is what the UN guarantees is that 13-year-olds or a child of any age can basically access contraception, has certain rights, but there's a caveat to all of those rights, and the caveat is that with due consideration to the age and maturity of the child. Now, what this means is that somebody, children are not autonomous, so somebody has to step in and decide for that child, because children don't make the best decisions. So what happens after the referendum is passed, that automatically goes to the state, because parents have given away their rights to be able to decide best interests. So there's a lot of implications. The law professors, judges, Supreme Court judges don't even know exactly what the implications of this will be.
Joe, I noticed you mentioned the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and I have a certain amount of knowledge on that side from the legal side we do in international rescue for families, but I may not be correct on this, you'll have to tell me. But my understanding of the UN Convention in this area is that each country is only in a position of having to report on how they advance in incorporating the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. They're not under any deadline to do this in any way, and the result of this has been so far that it really hasn't been incorporated in the domestic law of countries to enable citizens and children through their parents even to access this in exercising those rights under a domestic law. And we don't have a direct access to the UN as citizens either. So although the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child exists, we can't find any case law because there are no cases of anyone exercising their rights. Yet it seems we have states picking and choosing now, from what you're describing, of what they want to take from the UN and make decisions on that basis that affect citizens. In other words, as you describe birth control, they're deciding to go with that, yet it's not incorporated into law in any way, is it, Joe?
No, it's a human rights law that just simply doesn't work. The UNCRC as a statement of altruism that we adore children, it's a beautiful document, but as a human rights law, there's no bite behind it, because as you said, there's no consequences for the state when they do fail. The UNCRC does not protect a single child in the world. I have mentioned that before on other shows, other radio stations, and people have scoffed at that and say, but this is a human rights law that gives them rights. As you said, there's no consequences for the state when they fail, because let's face it, the UN doesn't even work anymore, because when you look at what is going on in Syria, if most of the nations get together and they all agree that we should intervene or we should send in troops or whatever, the fact is that it can be vetoed by the larger countries anyway. So if the UN as an organization has outlived its purpose. But in regard to what the UNCRC actually does for children, it does nothing. It doesn't protect a single child in the world. All it does is it gives them the right to be protected, which is not quite the same thing. because what happened?
No,
Yep. So you're breaking up a little bit, Kevin.
please continue.
Oh, sorry. The UNCRC doesn't protect a single child in the world when you think about it, because we are told that every country in the world has not just signed it, they ratified it, but in the world today you have starving children, millions of children starving to death every year. You have child brides, child soldiers, the death penalty for children. You have child forced labor, you name it, horrendous abuse of children going on in the world, all in countries where they have actually ratified the UNCRC. Now, there is the option for countries to put in their own caveats into ratifying it. And what has happened in most Islamic countries is what they have done is they have put the clause subject to Sharia law. When Ireland ratifies this, there are no caveats. It's just they are ratifying the entire convention plus all the protocols. So effectively, the UNCRC is not protecting any child. It's just simply giving them the rights to be. You may remember, say, about 10 years ago when people used to use the term children in need. Do you remember that, Kevin?
I do.
Yeah, these children are in need of homes or food or whatever. Where that all came about was the UN. The UNCRC is run by UNICEF, and UNICEF is the largest children's charity in the world. But what used to happen about 10, 15 years ago was that you put your money into that UNICEF can, and that money went, 99% of it went directly to people helping these families. And up until 1995, and from UNICEF's inception, UNICEF was run by a man by the name of James P. Grant. And James Grant was he was credited with saving more lives than Stalin, Hitler, and Mao took. And his policy was very, very simple, that you go into a village, that you can't just feed the children, you have to feed the adults as well, but also on the principle that it takes a whole community to raise a child. But another little principle that he used was that rather than just give a man a fish, teach a man to fish. So what UNICEF used to do is that they used to go into villages and actually put clean drinking water, teach the people agriculture, to focus on basic nutrition of people, sanitation, a huge problem in many parts of the world. And this is why children are dying now, because UNICEF don't do this anymore. All they do is they go to governments and say, here, sign this document called the UNCRC, and they're not actually doing that anymore. You have questions, Kevin?
Yeah, it sounds like paper lip service now rather than action. To me, it's evident from what you're saying. And to add to that, a couple of years ago, I was dealing with a case in international law where the question came up of the rights of the child whilst in the care of the state in the UK. And as a result of that, and several exchanges with the mother involved in this case, she finally received an email from UNICEF confirming that the rights of the child under the UN Convention were not exercisable in the UK. Thus, there was no legal mechanism incorporated into law, which confirms what you're saying, Joe, really. And I've got that in writing if anyone would ever like to see that. So we're in the same situation today where with no exercisable legal mechanism, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child is impotent as far as children and parents are concerned, full stop in jurisdiction, yet at the same time, states are picking and choosing what they want out of that to control changes in society by saying it's under the UN.
Effectively, what is happening in state care, whether you're talking about the UK or Ireland, is the state is the vindicator. State is the parent, so the state is the vindicator for the rights of the child. So if you have a child in care, and I know of an example of this, a 15-year-old girl who was raped in Ireland, and the mother has no rights as a parent anymore because the child is in care. So she can't walk into a police station and say, my daughter's been raped and report a crime. So what happens is when you have the social worker as the child's parent, the state is liable because the child was raped because they had a duty to protect that child, which they didn't. So when you show up in court, you have a situation where you have the state on one side vindicating the rights of the child to the judge. On the other side of the table, you have the situation where the state is opposing the child. I mean, that is impossible. But what's going to happen when the referendum is changed is that you're going to have the same situation in the UK as in Ireland as you have in the UK. And basically, it will effectively mean that every single child in the state, because the state vindicates for the right of the child and not the parent, it effectively means that every child in Ireland will be in care in the legal sense, because the state vindicates and opposes the child at the same time. So effectively, you've removed parents from the whole picture. Andrew, did you wanted to?
Oh yeah. Well, I just typed it in because I know Kevin gets a bit excited with these shows, especially when they involve children. But yeah, I wanted to ask: will this be the start of a process to lower the age of consent for sex in children? That's what's come up in the chat box.
It's a very interesting question. To be honest, nobody knows. There are of course the Constitution is constitutional law, which is just the Supreme Court, and what happens is you have statutory law. Now, England and Scotland and Wales have fairly sensible laws with regard to the age of consent. The age of consent is 16. It is in conflict with the UNCRC because the CRC is such a vaguely written document that you have a human rights law and you have the statutory and the two laws opposed to each other, because the UNCRC says that basically children have the right to do whatever they want without regard for their parents. So if your 12-year-old decides that he wants to become a Scientologist instead of a Lutheran, then that's his decision, and you can't interfere with his decision. So it's craziness to think. I mean, as I say, it's a beautiful document, but it's just craziness to think that that children are autonomous, that they can make decisions for themselves. This is why nature intended, to have parents, to have a mother and father that for every child. And what is happening is that this whole somebody described it as an extreme feminist idea, which is behind the UNCRC, that this whole ideal has crept into it. So you have all this politically correct nonsense going on today, that parents know nothing about children and they're guilt tripped into everything. You have to do this, you have to buy this video, your child is being abused unless they have this, that, or the other. So it's very hard to say what will happen. To answer that question from the chat room, the UK, as I say, has very sensible laws, but I don't think that they are enforced, because you read stories. There was one story of, I think, an 11-year-old girl, and 11-year-old boy had a baby technically that's illegal. That it shouldn't be happening. But this is not an area of expertise for me, so I don't know. But
I totally agree with you there, Joe. But
let me just tell you what the crazy situation in Ireland. There is a case. It was up before the Supreme Court where a 16-year-old boy and a 15-year-old girl who were in a loving relationship, and one of the fathers found them in bed, called the police. And what happens in Ireland, the way the law is being interpreted in Ireland now, is that if a girl rapes a boy, an underage boy under the age of 16, that she cannot be charged. A female under the age of 16 cannot be charged with sexually assaulting anybody else, but a boy can. So if you think about this, they're in a loving relationship. They are underage, but what happens is that the boy will be charged. So what will happen is if the couple later get married, that he's a sex offender, and obviously she's going to suffer the consequences of that. You'll be limited with jobs. So I think the whole thing needs to be looked at, because I don't have the answers for it, but it's a very good question. Is that in my opinion, I don't think that 13-year-olds should be having sex, boys or girls. But it's kind of like nature gives you a Ferrari and gives you the keys to the Ferrari and says, don't drive that until you're 16. And these are the type of questions that I really have no opinion on it, but I think it's something that really, really needs to be looked at.
Well, I think what the person was saying, because I know them personally, they've heard good information from different authorities to say this is what the government and the departments are trying to do. Not that it's the right thing for the child, but because their sheer greed for money and power. But yeah. So carry on, Joe.
Question, interject at this point. Going back a bit, you were mentioning a little while ago that we were looking at the situation of the rights of the child, and you were mentioning whether it was appropriate for a child to speak, and that's actually determined in law when we're dealing with any kind of legal process, whether it be domestic law, constitutional law at that end of the scale, or human rights law, in that a child has to be considered Gillick competent to directly express its views to the court in any way. And if a child is not considered Gillick competent, then those views are normally exercised by the parent voicing those views or guardian voicing those views. And that would be the appropriate process. In the present constitutional arrangement, there is no exceptional case circumstance which permits the state to become parent, removing the right of the parent to voice the child's views or the guardian to voice the child's views. So if we change from that to a situation where this exceptional circumstance decision can be made by any court in Ireland at any level, and it won't be exceptional, it'll be by choosing, there's no rules around this, choosing when they want to do so, this will then lead us surely into a situation where all children, whether they're Gillick competent or not, will finish up having to really try to voice their views of what they want or don't want for themselves through the parent, being then the state. Now, unfortunately, like you say, you can't have the state on both sides of the case. In domestic law, that would be the case for sure. You'd have the state being asked to take a case possibly against itself if the child has been abused in care, and I don't think the state will do that. And in constitutional law, if there was a constitutional argument, you'd have the same problems in elevating the case between the High Court and the Constitutional Court in getting through application. But also, more worrying is, at the moment, parents can exercise the rights of the child through ECHR Strasbourg, or the HRA, as in human rights law within the domestic law of Ireland. Once the child becomes effectively under the parental control of the state, then that decision and everything about the child is decided by the state. I cannot see how the state would take a human rights case for the child when the child's rights are breached by the state or any government body or organisation that would be appropriate to take those actions against, basically being the only ones that you can under human rights law, if they are parent and also exercising the children's rights at the same time. Not only that, but I cannot see the legal present mechanism permitting that to take place, Joe.
It's just not going to happen, and this is why I say that children are not protected in care. Some of the stories in the UK, Jack Straw introduced some legislation so that if a Mark and Nikki Webster case happened again, that they wouldn't, nobody would in the press would know about it. As you well know, that there is theory and practice, and there is the theory of law. I've been debating with somebody on Facebook who understands law very well, and they say, but you know, you have all of these mechanisms in place for children. Like if a child is raped in care, then theoretically you should be able to do this, that, and the other. And the fact is that in practice, you cannot. There's no mechanism to do anything, because what happens is that to go back to this 15-year-old girl who's raped in care, her mother, if she walks into a police station and says my daughter was raped, the police sergeant is going to say, well, look, here's the situation. If I go to the social worker to get her version of events, the social worker is going to tell me that you broke the in-camera rule. So the fact is that in practice there is absolutely no mechanism for children who are in the care of the state because of this opposition, because of the state vindicating the rights of the child on one side and then opposing the rights of the child on the other side. And the fact that usually when children are abused or when their rights are abused, it's usually by the state. So it's a crazy situation for children in care, and I'm actually even surprised that story came out recently, because there's a case that I know of in Ireland. A family 4 years ago got their children back because after a long drawn-out process where solicitors were trying to make money, stretching the case out, and the HSE were stretching the case out, saying, well, we have to get this assessment done, and we have to do a core assessment and parenting assessment, and they tried basically everything, and then finally the judge just had enough of it, and the last straw was when somebody perjured themselves in court, and it could actually be proven that they had perjured themselves. What happened was the judge gave the children back. The parents then went through the court system and are still in the court system today. They have a question before the Supreme Court, and the question is, can the in-camera rule be dropped so that the police can investigate the perjury that occurred in the family court? I mean, this is absolutely ludicrous. The fact is that there's two parallel systems of justice, and I think the Mark and Nikki Webster case illustrates that perfectly, because what happens is this is the part that people don't understand, is that there's two. There's the justice system that we all know about and we see on TV, and then there's the family court system, which is an alternate universe. So what happened to Mark and Nikki Webster is they are wrongly accused of child abuse. Their children are taken away, they're arrested, the police investigate, and by the time the case actually came to court, which took a long time in the criminal courts, the children had already been adopted. So when they were vindicated in the criminal courts, they went back to the family court and said, we want our children back. And Lord Justice Wall, who's the president, at the appeal said that no, you can't have your children back because this would cause distress to the adoptive parents to return your children. It gets even worse than that, because what happened was they are still on a registry that says that they are a risk to children, even though they have been vindicated in the criminal court. They are still a risk to children. How is that possible? You can lose 3 children. You're branded for life. You can't work with children. What happened was, even when after the criminal case happened, Nikki got pregnant again, and social services said, well, we're going to take that baby as well and put that baby up for adoption. These people are clearly innocent. So they fled to Ireland. The case eventually got sorted out, and they let them keep their 4th child. But this is just absolute madness. But the fact is that it is starting to come out. The cracks are starting to show, because the Slovakian government, and I know of a few other governments, are starting to look at what's going on, because the fact is that the UK and Ireland they're the same system, but the Irish system is just 5, 10 or 15 years behind. Nobody else in Europe uses this system. They do in the United States and Canada. The Norwegians are a little oppressive, and in the Netherlands also. Germany actually has more children in care per capita than any other country, but no other country in Europe, with the possible exception of Croatia, actually has forced adoption. So this is the other thing that will be introduced into Ireland, is if this referendum passes, is that now they're going to be able to take your kids away and you will never see them again.
Joe,
extreme. Yep.
On that point, never see them again, is truly so, because we're dealing with international adoption here, as we're seeing in the UK and around the world. Children are being adopted out of the country they're in, with no rights to see their grandparents and their families ever again, which is why we've got a situation of all European states now taking actions against the UK for taking their children of their grandparents. That it's going this far, because obviously the UK is the example of where it's all going and what's coming to Ireland. Now, I've just been presented with, from our research, Katie, with the Future Children's Rights Guideline amendments. I don't know whether you've read them, to come into force once they get a yes vote. Have you read them as yet, Joe?
The Irish ones?
Yes.
I've read through some of them, but to be honest with you, I knew what the amendments would be, because as I've been saying for 4 years, that the Irish system is the UK system. It's just 5, 10 or 15 years behind.
If I can draw the parallels, you are right in what you say. It's developing later in the same direction is what you're saying, Joe. Yeah. I'm just going to take a few points from it. If I deal with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, some elements to be incorporated into the Children's First Guidelines, but we're not seeing any of the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child being incorporated into domestic law that might protect the child from the state or state bodies. It's very one-sided in the incorporation, because it's the state that decides what it incorporates. So, of course, it's going to put the protection in for itself, and the necessarily material elements of the UN Convention that might protect the child against the parent, but not the state. And as an example of this, we've got, I'm only going to pick out a couple of points. In 1.6.2.2, Best Interest of the Child, Article 3, all actions concerning the child shall take account of his or her best interests. Same as the UK, as you say, Joe. The state shall provide the child with adequate care when parents or others charged with that responsibility fail to do so. Of course, the fail to do so is going to be decided in the exceptional case circumstances, which has not been defined in any way in the Constitution. Therefore, it's up to interpretation at any time by subordinate law and any judge, and possibly eventually, if a further variation occurs, it could be made by a social worker or the HSE themselves at some level. Now, on the other side of this, in 3.3.2 of the Children's First Guidelines proposed to come in, it deals with emotional abuse, and it describes some of the types of emotional abuse that I'm going to pick out on this. And do remember that the next stage of this is to make it potential emotional abuse, like the UK, where the parents are completely innocent, proved to be innocent, but experts just argue potential risk on corrupt reports which they've been proved to be corrupt, because we've got so many cases now of experts being struck off and found to be so. But I'll just read some of them. In 3.3.2, conditional parenting, these are things that are considered to be emotional abuse. Conditional parenting, in which the level of care shown to a child is made contingent on his or her behaviours or actions. So it means that I'm interpreting that you've got to have an absolute method of conditioning as a parent, and you're not allowed to adapt around your children's reactions and behaviours, which is extraordinary. That's the first point. 3, emotional unavailability by the child's parent carer. God, aren't parents going to be in trouble with this? And no doubt that can be easily argued somewhere along the lines. 4, unresponsiveness, inconsistent or inappropriate expectations of the child. 5, premature imposition of responsibility on the child. Well, I would have thought birth control might be premature. I don't know what you think, Joe. But that's being incorporated by the state. Of course, they can do that, but the parent can't do anything. 6, unrealistic or inappropriate expectations of the child's capacity to understand something or to behave and control himself in a certain way. How wide-ranging this is. 7, under or over protection of the child. One of the biggest allegations in the UK, where Munchausen's, fabricating illness, and all kinds of expert arguments are used to take children from parents that have never harmed them at all. And finally, 8, failure to show interest in or provide age-appropriate opportunities for the child's cognitive and emotional development. All of this to be decided by the social workers and medical experts, who will be on a gravy train once forced adoption comes in. Now, the concerning thing I want to put back to you on the base of all that is around this, decision of exceptional case. And once that's decided, I want to paint a picture of possibly the equivalent decision in England that might be used prior to forced adoption, that removes the right of the parent to exercise protection of the child. And that is under the placement order. The placement order in England is granted after a full care order, and the placement order dispenses with the parental rights. This is the element of forced adoption that really exists in England. And once that's dispensed with, the parent can't exercise rights to protect the child, and there is very little they can do, because this child is effectively really being parented by the state until the adoptive parents adopt the child, and then, of course, there's nothing a parent can do at all. So the Irish decision exactly parallels this, as you're saying, Joe, in this exceptional case. Is this not exactly what we've got in the UK, dressed up in the constitutional language to exclude the parent's rights in exactly the same way as the UK?
The beauty of all of this is that if I am a psychologist and I get up on the stand and I say anything about you, which is my subjective opinion, and I am a forensic psychologist, there's no way that you can dispute that. That is cast in stone. That is almost science. So the fact is that you could get 10 different psychologists to examine the same child and come away with 10 different opinions, because it's not based on science. It's evidence-based. Psychology is a product that's oversold these days. It's wormed its way into all aspects of society. And here we see it being used in government, where Tony Blair, I was looking at a YouTube video this week, and Tony Blair is basically advocating eugenics, that we're going to fix all these problems in these lawless estates in the UK, and we're going to fix it with an army of social workers. But the fact is that it's not working. If you look at adoption, 1 in 4 adoptions break down, and in Irish state care at the moment, I was trying to get a figure on how many children have been adopted in Ireland, and it's almost impossible to get any information from the HSE or the government, because they don't tend to post anything that tends to put them in a bad light. But the fact is that for every 4 children that were adopted on average, say from Russia, the Ukraine, wherever in Ireland, 1 in 4 of those relationships broke down, and the child was dumped back into the care system. Now, can you imagine if 1 in 4 birth children were actually rejected by their parents? It's just you have to look at this in terms of outcomes. Does it do what it says on the tin? And the fact that it doesn't. However you choose to measure this system, the fact is that it doesn't work. The beauty of it is the secrecy behind it that allows them to do whatever they like.
Joe, at that point, can I just take us into the first music break,
Yep.
if that's okay? The music may be very appropriate for what you just stated, by enabling them to do whatever they like, but we'll see anyway. Thank you, Joe. We'll be coming out the other side shortly.
You're listening to Critical Mass Radio. Now it's our turn.
We've got Joe Burns talking about the Irish Children Rights Referendum, due to be aired in the Dublin Parliament, called the Dáil, I believe, on November the 10th. Carry on there, Joe and Kevin.
Please do, Joe. Please carry on with where you left off.
Yeah, we were saying, does it do what it says on the tin? And the reason that it doesn't work is 2 reasons. One is psychology, because psychology is a wonderful thing, one-on-one, that if you are depressed and suicidal, that if you have a skilled therapist can get, can put your life back on track. But is psychology robust enough? Is it scientific enough to be used in courts to be able to affect the most draconian punishment that you can possibly effect on a parent, which is to remove their child for life, and it's a punishment on the children in most cases as well. Does it work? It doesn't work, because what happens is social workers are using psychology as their only tool. It's not evidence-based. It's purely the subjective opinion of the person holding that opinion. You have a question?
It's exactly so, Joe, like you say. It's purely opinion. And we're looking at cases where we're going to see the same in Ireland as England, as many, many parents find themselves subject to allegations that are then proven to be unfounded. They're cleared. Then they have to run the gauntlet of many social services and medical expert assessments, which result in 400 cases again of children being taken into care by order or kept in care against every one returned to the parent. The statistics speak for themselves, what opinion can do once a parent has been cleared. And a lot of this is to avoid litigation of the state overtaking the children, the state admitting it was wrong, the state's arrogance even in having the power to not return the children. And this is also occurring even in cases where corruption is proven, the children are not returned to the parents, which is outrageous to break the family up this way. And if we look at this going over to Ireland, what we would be seeing in the courts would be where parents who have not harmed their children in any way are then found innocent in the proceedings or prior to the proceedings, to then face this gauntlet, which no other parent in Ireland would have to, or England, because they would have to be subject to an allegation before they would be forced into this process to get back out of it. So they're entrapped in a process that is not tested on everyone. And then the opinion of experts alone, without any fact or anything happening at all, would be all that would remove those children's rights to remain with their parents. And those poor children would know they haven't been harmed, they would know their parents love them and they love the parents. How on earth can you reverse that kind of damage in those poor children?
It's absolutely absurd, because what happens is that you can't, because on studies that have been done on foster care, that 80% of the children coming out of the foster care system, many of them are dumped on the streets by their foster carers. 80% of them are dysfunctional. And when I say dysfunctional, I don't mean any disrespect to anybody who spend time in care, but in terms of comparing the outcomes for these children to children in the general population, and there was a huge study done on this, which is widely ignored by the social work and psychology community because it wasn't done by a psychologist. Was done by a gentleman by the name of Joseph Doyle at MIT, who was a business professor, and he did a 12-year study of with 15,000 subjects, and he found that most of these children are going to end up in jail. 43% of the prison population in Ireland have been in care. When you look at all of the outcomes, and this is how we should be measuring the system, the fact is that what you were saying about the way that it's supposed to be in the Constitution currently, and the way that it's supposed to be after the referendum if it passes, is that the state can only intervene in exceptional cases. But the fact is because of the secrecy and because of the flawed psychology behind all of this, and because it's not evidence-based, is that children are being taken for reasons that are actually illegal. Because if these cases were actually heard in criminal courts, what you would see is social workers being jailed for what is happening, because they're allowed to break the law. But the bottom line on the system is that it doesn't work. It's the justice system part of it doesn't work. It's I help families, and basically when you a child can be taken into care for life, or you can lose your child to adoption purely on suspicion without being charged with any crime. But when you have to prove yourself innocent, which is an almost impossible task, the evidence that you have to have has to be 100% criminal, like to the criminal standard. But your child can be taken away on the basis of suspicion.
Yes, Joe. What you're saying there, if I can just interject a little bit on that. When you say the criminal standard, we're talking about decisions being made on the basis of fact only, whereas in civil proceedings like child proceedings behind secrecy as well, those decisions are made or theoretically made to both sides on the basis of what is hearsay as well. So you can have a doctor come on and he can say, my colleague has said this to me about this person, which makes them a risk to the child, and therefore the child needs taking into care. And you can't bring that doctor into court easily, because that doctor who has been given the evidence on that doctor has been given in hearsay, preventing you defending the hearsay evidence. That's how hearsay works in the court. I know most people won't understand that, but it's tactical when the state and the expert witnesses for social services in the gravy train Dutch auction of experts corrupt enough to go into that side. All our experts aren't like this. I don't want people to get that opinion. It's to do with the attraction in the Dutch auction of gravy train, low empathy, corrupt experts, which eventually do get caught out, but not until that they have put really hundreds of children into a situation of being torn from the parents before this happens. And of course that's not reversed. Now in court, when a parent's giving evidence, because we work in legal proceedings as well, The court is very critical as the state. You've got the state on the other side of social services, the HSE in Ireland, or the social services in England, the local authority. You've got the guardian, who is effectively state, and you've got the judiciary, who effectively, obviously, tends to lean towards the state. So you're in a situation as a lowly parent with a state legal team who also tends to massage the court to an extent, never more so than in the UK, which leads to a situation of your children effectively being handed over if you haven't got the capability to fight the cases yourselves, and even then you're ignored as a lay litigant pretty well. This situation, when presenting evidence, does not allow a parent to present the evidence in the same hearsay basis. A parent cannot walk into a court and say, my neighbour did this or said this. It's just not allowable. Yet a medical expert or a social worker can do that. That is unfair because you are not on the same balanced level as your opponents in court at all. And that's why so many parents lose the cases, 400 to 1.
Exactly. The way that you just explained it is that in the family court, in the criminal court, everybody knows how it works. It's beyond all reasonable doubt. In the family courts, it's reasonable suspicion, but it's only reasonable. The state only needs reasonable suspicion. If the parent tries to prove themselves innocent, they have to prove themselves innocent beyond all reasonable doubt. There's a friend of mine who is a psychologist as well as being an engineer, and I've been talking to him for the last couple of months, and he's put together some mathematics that I clearly don't understand, but he's talking about false positives and false negatives. And effectively, you have about a 25% chance of justice happening in the court because it's so stacked up against you that you have to prove beyond all reasonable doubt your innocence, and you are guilty until you are proven innocent, and you are punished regardless of whether you are innocent or not. As Ian Josephs calls it, punishment without crime. There's no legal basis for for any of this happening. I listened to a member of the Children's Charity in Ireland saying that there are 2,000 abandoned children in Irish state care who have been abandoned by their parents. I don't believe a word of it because I've met the parents, I've met the children mostly coming out of the system at the other end, and as I was saying before, that many of these children are so damaged by the process. There was a study that came out of UCD in University College Dublin a few weeks ago that says that children in state care are 5 times more likely to suffer from mental illness. Now, there's loads of other statistics to back that up. The Joseph Doyle study at MIT, but perhaps one of the most telling studies that was ever done is the fact that statistically in the UK, if you are a woman who grew up in the care of the state, you are 66 times more likely to have your child removed than a woman who grew up in the general population. So essentially, they know that care is bad for children. They absolutely know this. They also know that, for example, that children in state care across Ireland, the UK, and the US are far more likely to be prescribed psychotropic drugs because of the fact that they're suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder from being separated from their parents and from their other siblings in many cases, that these children are so damaged that they're actually being fed psychotropic drugs. So is it really any wonder that when they come out of the system at the age of 18, when they're dumped on the streets in many cases, that they end up being drug addicts and end up in jail. I mean, it's no surprise at all. But the bottom line is that the system doesn't work. What we don't need a referendum in Ireland. What we need is Ryan Report 2. People have to understand it's very hard to get your head around how this whole system works. Is that I'm blogging with people, chatting to people on Facebook and saying, but you don't realize that there's two distinct systems of justice. There's a secret system that you never hear about. You don't. So you really need to understand how that system works, because most people think that it's like they see on TV with Judge Judy, that you just go before a judge and you must be guilty. But the fact is that from what I see from representing these or helping to represent these people, helping them to fight their cases, is that it's a virtually impossible task, because the odds are so stacked against you. Even social workers have told me that once a child goes into care, it's extremely difficult to get them out at the other end. So there's a question from the chat room too. Maybe I'll cover that. It says, I believe there's an 18-member committee who drafted the UNCRC. Also believe it's eugenics that form the base of all the protocols within it. I would like to know who commissioned it initially. Was it UNICEF, the UN, or the World Health Organization? About that is that first of all, I don't believe that there are evil people out there, that there's some big Illuminati, or there's some secret organizations. There certainly are big secret organizations, but I believe that all of this is done by very good people with the very best intentions in mind. That if I was to say on your show that all radio talk show hosts were corrupt or it just, to tar everybody with the same brush, it just wouldn't make any sense. But I firmly believe that the system is corrupt, but not so much the people behind it, because the social workers in England, when I look at the websites and I see some of this astonishing information come out, they don't understand the public criticism that they say about the baby P case. I was looking at some of the social worker blogs, and they say, but why are they criticizing us? We did our job. We went there. We did. They're criticizing you because baby Peter Connolly died, and social workers were in the house 60 times, and that's the public perception of why this just simply doesn't work. Have I covered all the questions from the chat room?
I was going to just interject with something here, Joe, where you are, if I can. If anyone else wants to come in with questions, that's great, from the chat room. What it is, I'm a counsellor, and part of counselling, I sometimes counsel people in many jurisdictions, including Australia, who are actually drug addicts and are coming off probably brown and going on to other treatments to deal with that. And they sometimes have children, and in that situation, what I'm hearing over and over again is an absolute belief from people who are drug addicts that they're absolutely safe from social services, because, as they say, everyone knows they don't take drug addicts' children. And it does seem to be true in many, many cases. They've got to really appear on the radar before they'll go there. And it's to do with the kind of harm that children suffer from low empathy, drug addiction type parents, that then makes them less suitable for forced adoption, less suitable for long-term care with others, than rather like baby P type situations. And these poor children are ignored by the system altogether. They don't get the attention, and they often prop up as appear as casualties before anything appears. And we do see sometimes social services held clearly responsible for this, but then what do? They just use it as another reason to take more children from parents that have never harmed their children. Easily adoptable children that don't have a financial consequence from litigation by adoptive parents for adopting out parents that are so seriously harmed. So we're in a situation that, from my perspective, I'm seeing selection of children to find the best quality children for adoption rather than the protection of children to place children that are being harmed in the care of others where they would be more suitably cared for.
I don't know if I believe that at all. I have heard that before, but fact is I try and steer away from anything that I cannot prove absolutely, because basically everything I've said is documented somewhere out there on the web. The baby P effect, as it's called, is that whenever something bad happens, whether, well, let's face it, the state are always at fault, that they twist it around and say, look, this is why we need children's rights, this is why we have to change. So I've listened to politicians in the Irish Parliament, the Dáil, say they're using 17 cases where parents were at fault, but the fact is it wasn't just the parents who were at fault, it was the state who was at fault in those cases. One of those cases was the Roscommon House of Horrors, and it's a perfect example of what you're saying, Kevin, but the drug addiction was two parents who were basically alcoholics, and they raped their children, they starved their children, the care was very, very inconsistent. There were continual complaints from neighbours that why don't you step in and do something about this, and social services in that family were actually involved for 11 years in that particular case. So the neighbours were calling the police and saying, look, these poor kids are going through my garbage looking for food. They would call the police, and then the police, not doing their job, would call social services and report on their concerns. What should have happened in that case, and what should have happened in other cases, is that the police should have stepped in, taken the children away. They have the right to do that. They don't need a warrant. They can break down your door. They can enter any kind of vehicle or any place without a warrant and take a child if they believe that the child is in danger. There's another famous case that, again, people cherry pick information and they try and spin it around to suit their argument. It was a case in Monaghan where you had two parents with two toddlers, basically, and what happened was they walked into an undertaker's and they said, we want to pick out caskets for our children. Now, understandably, the undertaker was very, very concerned, because you don't walk in with two healthy children and say that I want to pick out caskets for my children. So the undertaker immediately contacted the police. What did the police do? They called the local parish priest to go around and look. Now, anybody who knows anything about suicidology, which the police should absolutely know about, because more people die from suicide than car accidents or any other cause. What the police should have done was broken down the door and taken the children away. People twisted around and said, well, it's because we have, I don't know if you know this, but in Ireland we have social services only work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and they provide an emergency aftercare system. But the fact is that any policeman has the power to break down your door, take your children. If the social services are not available, they can take your child to a hospital, take them to a police station, to a place of safety.
the fact is that the failure in this system is that the mechanisms are all there already, but people are twisting around these 17 cases where both parents and the state failed these children. They're trying to twist this around and spin it into saying that this is why we need more power to intervene. And they conveniently forget that 196 children died in the care of the state in a decade. That's 6 times the rate of children dying in the general population. That's how bad the care system is. This is why we need Ryan Report 2 instead of a referendum. On top of that, there was also 500 children who went missing, who were actually trafficked in and out of Ireland, that were in the care system. They were put up in bed and breakfasts with no guardian. That the social worker brought the child to a bed and breakfast, said, "Here, we'll pay your room rent for the night," and basically just left them on their own. 500 children went missing. Though many of those children were tracked down later in brothels in Amsterdam and other countries where they had been trafficked. So when people try and twist all of these things around to say that this is why we need more powers of intervention and we need more control, they're cherry picking the information and they're putting an awful lot of spin on it. The power is already there because any policeman can walk into any house or any structure and remove any child at any time. So
yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. Before we go into a music break, I just wanted to just cover a couple of points that you said in the area of looking at how children are taken, for one thing. When you mentioned the situation with police, in England it's been very much more serious than that for a long time. The police do use battering rams to go through the doors, as you described, sometimes at night, terrifying the children, and they take the children on the thinnest of evidence, and just at the instructions, really, of social services. And the children are horrendously traumatised by the experience. Sometimes they return to the parents then to go through the assault course of medical experts' assessments once they're found innocent of what is actually alleged in the first place. The children at this point are absolutely terrified because they've never had their home invaded like this in such a horrendous way, and they're constantly watching out the windows for the attack by social services and the police again, because their little minds now know that this can happen.
Can I tell you a story about that, Kevin?
Yeah, sure. Can I bring you in at the other side of the break, Joe?
Yeah, sure.
That's okay. I do want you to continue with that. You've obviously got a good story. And we're going to bring in Maggie Tuttle as well, if that's okay, Joe, because she'll be interested in what you've got to say and the way around, if that's all right.
Excellent.
To compare the two systems. Okay, Andy, do you want to take that into the break?
Yeah, sure. You're listening to the Avenues Rebel Show with me, Andy Peacher, and Kevin Bull. Join us every Sunday evening, 6 to 8, on criticalmassradio.co.uk, and every Friday evening, 7 to 9. Yeah, and of course, don't forget to visit www.criticalmassradio.co.uk and click the donation button. Every penny helps save the world from not hearing the truth even. So I got that bit wrong. Yeah, every penny will keep this show on air, the station on air, and of course we'll let everybody hear the truth. Right, Kevin and Joe, carry on, mate.
Please,
what you were saying, Kevin, the little children traumatized by battering rams and police grabbing them in the middle of the night. There's a little friend of mine. He's 5 years old now. Absolutely adorable little child. When he was 6 months and he was breastfeeding, he was taken into care, and he was in care for 8 months and then returned home. From the age of 15 months right up until I lived with the family for over a year. I babysat that child, and I would be sitting beside him when he would have his afternoon naps. At the age of 3 and 4, he was waking up screaming in terror because he was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. The bad people are going to take me away. That I want my mommy and daddy. That it's almost as if there's no effect to these children. But again, stressing the point that I was making earlier is that the fact is that when you look at the effectiveness of this system, does it do what it says in the tin? And the fact is that it doesn't. The justice part of it doesn't work. The foster care part of it doesn't work. The adoption part of it doesn't work. And the interventions don't work. And the biggest thing that doesn't work is the psychology behind all of this. There are far better models for the UK to follow. For example, in most of Europe, in particular, I've studied France and Spain, and what happens is if a social worker in Spain wants to take a child, they have to go to the police. They both have to go before a judge. The judge actually has investigative power, so the judge can walk out of his office with the social worker and the police, go visit the family, see what's going on, and make the decision right there and then. By default, what we have in Ireland and the UK now is just by default, take the child, shoot first and ask questions later. And this is what really, really damages children. It's unjust. It's damaging to children.
Joe,
yep.
What you're depicting is clearly what we see in the UK as well on the effects on children. It's not considered because when the state intervenes, they don't consider they cause any harm, and they certainly don't want to document it. And because of that, it's not acknowledged in any way, and the poor kids are ignored. This is the frightening thing with the changes if the Constitution was to be changed, and to make the state the parents as well, with this exceptional circumstance that won't be exceptional, of course, because the decision is already made when a child is taken into care anyway, really. We're going to see a state where the state as it is, which is failing families and recognised to be failing families and children, is going to be empowered further to fail families and children, with no one being able to exercise the human rights of those children.
Well, the whole point of this referendum is for the government to become less accountable, if that's even possible, because as it stands now, what I'm calling for is Ryan Report 2. Ryan Report 1 was about the failings of children in the church-run institutions. But what is actually happening to children at the moment is far worse than ever occurred, because there's whole new dimensions to this, that children are in facilities where they're being paid €5,000 a week per child, and the children are so damaged at this point from being shuffled around from one place to another without having a parent. That's the whole point, is that you cannot take a child and just have a babysitter from the age of 0 to 18. It doesn't work. The solution that they have to that is adoption. Adoption is not working either. What works is family preservation. It's cheaper, it's less damaging, and it requires an awful lot less people to actually operate it. Kevin, I'm going to let you speak for a minute, because there's a question from the chat room here. I just need a minute to read it.
Can I just comment on that?
Sure.
What we really need, Kevin and Joe, from years ago, is a good old granny, the good old auntie that will come in, smack you in the head and say, look, I'm having your kids until you wake up, get rid of that addiction, get a job, and they will come in, the granny will come in and do that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And, of course, with forced adoption, grannies are in the way, so they're excluded straight away, because you can't forcibly adopt children unless you can exclude granny and granddad as well.
Andrew, there's a little point about that too. I wrote it in my book that this is the way that it used to be dealt with years ago. If I broke somebody's window, playing football or whatever, I'd get a clip around the ear. My father would be forced to, to pay for it and repair it, and then, I would get some punishment. You can't do that anymore with this politically correct nonsense that goes on around child protection, because I remember an incident when I was a kid that what I did was it was just after Halloween, and we found some unexploded fireworks and so we took them all apart and scraped them, and there was an anthill in the back garden, and we decided we would blow up the anthill. So what happened was we blew up the anthill. There was soil everywhere. We cleaned it before our parents got home. Neighbors come running. Nothing happened. If that same event happened today, you would have the bomb squad, the anti-terrorists. You would have armed police everywhere. You would have 100 government officials descending on the area. The children would be removed. There'd be psychological counselling. There'd be trauma sessions and everything. When all that's needed is just a good clip around the ear. So I give that back to Kevin. Your point.
Yeah, I know. It seems that once you remove that, you see, we've got different functions in society, across society. We function in different ways, and we've got one set of methods being brought in to critically manage children, shall we say, under one very finite set of rules, part of which I read on the children's rights guidelines, the new ones. So we've got a situation that we're trying to apply exactly the same rules to all areas of society, when culturally different areas of society function in different ways. To the far, if we go far enough down within society's functioning, intelligence and awareness, we can get to an area that everything is done in a very emotive level and is more likely to be spontaneous, and those children are often taken into care. But it can be equally damaging at the top of the spectrum, where parents are very low caring, narcissistic, or even low empathy, psychopathic in nature, at the top of the spectrum, or so intellectual that they don't really emotionally integrate with their children well. This results in children feeling emotionally isolated during the upbringing with parents at that end of the scale, and this then results in damage that is often presented as narcissism, presenting narcissism as adults. So there's damage on both ends of the scale, and in the middle somewhere are probably parents who possibly get it about right, but you can't be so idealistic with society and expect everyone to get it right to such a finite line. Start removing children on the scale that it is now, requesting like Bernardo's for a 400% increase in forced adoption in the UK, which we've heard, and then not acknowledge the fact that 80% of US prisoners have spent time in care, 40-odd% in Ireland, and I believe it's 40-odd%, someone would correct me with the figures, in England as well, in the UK as well, clearly showing the failings of the care system that children are being taken into. So we're taking children from situations of obviously potential arguments only and placing them in a known failing system that is damaging children. Up to 80% are affected this way. So it's an awful situation, Joe.
The problem is that people don't know this, that the parents have been guilt. Sorry, dropped the microphone. Parents have been guilt-tripped in all this, that you have to buy this book, you have to buy this DVD for your children, you have to buy them a happy meal instead of an unhappy meal. That it's just guilt. The fact is that Andrew's point is correct. All that's needed is just a clip across the back of the ear and lesson learned, but you can't do that anymore because
the response to it, which is more invasive, which is more going to do more damage to the child. Just, a spanking on the bottom given out of love for the child to show them that there are consequences for their actions, or to have children grow up to think that there are no consequences for their actions.
Well, shall we look at that on the other side of the break, Joe? I see your point you're making there. Let's look at that and think about that for a moment. And we'll go into the music break if we can and come on the other side, hopefully with Maggie, and we can all kick this about to look at the reactions to children and how it affects their development, yeah?
Welcome to Maggie Tuttle. We have Joe here and Kevin, as usual. It's the News Rebel Show on criticalmassradio.co.uk. Don't forget, everybody, two things. Visit freethinkingvoice.org, that's freethinkingvoice.org, where you'll hear the show again, and also go to the Facebook page, Church of England. It's a personal campaign regarding Lewis and Ryan.
I was going to say, good evening, Maggie. If it's okay, Andy, can Joe finish off his point, because I'm sure Maggie would like to input on that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I was just saying, Maggie, that which harms children more, to give them a spanking out of love, to teach them a lesson, to show them that there are consequences to their actions, or to have a huge state intervention, to have police breaking down your door, dragging your children off to, they don't understand what's happening, and then to put them at a higher risk by placing them in care. I mean, which one is more damaging to a child, Maggie?
To be taken and dragged away by the police. I have to come in and say here, Paul, I think a lot of the fault about children being dragged away lies with the families. The families have got to learn, even on breakups, mums and dads have got to learn to talk, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. The families have got to learn to stay together so that if there are any problems, that child is safe. But there's far too many family feudings going on.
Yes.
And as for giving a child a slap, I've always sat with children and sat them around a table, and it's always been, come on, time to talk, whatever age, if they're able to speak. And I think it's more important to sit children down like the politicians. You sit around the table with a drink and you discuss the problem. And the word I've always taught to children is the word, and please remember, all you families, is compromise. You compromise and children will understand. And as they're growing up, round the table, oh, here she goes again, round the table, and down they go, and they learn. And you don't have to smack a child, but I will say, if children were not naughty, that's how they learn, by being naughty, because then we adults are supposed to say, well, that's not the correct thing to do. But
Maggie, don't forget that social services
Joe,
also...
as you well know.
Maggie, don't forget that social services also use physical restraint around children. Some of the terms used for it have been pinned down and various other policies that are adopted in institutionalised care. So when a child in any way doesn't go along with things like pin down have been used. It was withdrawn at one time and then put back in again. And if we listen to survivor stories of sexual abuse, this often has occurred starting as pin down and then developing into sexual abuse while in institutionalised care, as we've heard from the stories from people. So whilst as parents we might be put in a situation of this is not correct, etc., whichever side of the bench you stand on, I'm afraid that social services and the states themselves do actually physically restrain. So, and that can become pretty intimidating to children.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the intervention is far worse. But let me just say that I don't agree with spanking. I've never hit a child. I have corrected many children, and as Maggie says, that it's a child's job to actually push the limits to see where the limits are. But I can understand in certain cases where a parent has a particularly difficult child, and there may be a need to chastise the child. Personally, I don't believe in spanking or slapping, but I don't see how that damages a child. I don't see that the sledgehammer approach to actually dragging that child off in a police car is a solution to anything, and then actually putting the child at a higher risk. There's a book written by a gentleman by the name of Eric Sigman, and people in the social work and psychology community don't particularly like Mr. Sigman, but he has pointed out that he's written a number of books. One of the books was called Spoiled Generation, and what he is saying in his books is that that basically we're having a whole generation grow up because of all of this politically correct nonsense that we have, a whole generation growing up not realizing that there are consequences to their actions. They're not just limits for children, but you have to teach the children where the limits are. Spanking, caning in schools, I mean, that went on for years and years. I'm glad it was abolished because I can remember being caned myself in school. I can't remember what I did wrong. I can remember my father spanking me. Again, I can't remember what I did wrong. As I said, I've been around a lot of children, nieces and nephews and that, and I've never found it necessary, I wouldn't call it using violence with a child, but sometimes you have to say restrain a child.
I think the word is to
grandmothers
respect
like
a
Maggie.
child, Joe. Joe,
Exactly.
I think the word is to respect a child. If a child is loved and respected and know that they can sit and talk to you, you'll get that respect back from the child.
Exactly. This is my point, Maggie, is that what happens is that when you have, this is the whole thing about what the referendum is about, is that who's going to vindicate for the rights of the child? Is it going to be the parent who is doing this out of love for a child, or is it going to be an incompetent, unaccountable state? And what we need is we need to get rid of many of the judges that are in the system, and we need to put grandmothers like Maggie Tuttle in instead, and juries of grandmothers who are going to actually fix families, because in a lot of cases the family can be fixed because it's a lot less damaging for the child, but they continuously use the sledgehammer approach to shoot first and ask questions later, where they just drag the child off.
Can I just say something, Joe?
Yes.
Just a very important point, and that is, I know from all the people I speak to, and Andy knows, and Kevin knows, and I'm sure you know, when a child is taken into care, there is no one at all they can turn to say, I'm being abused. They are shut up with fear. And the parents are not allowed to ask any questions if they have contact with that child. So there's nowhere. If they go to the school tell the social services. If they tell a friend at school, well, it doesn't go anywhere. The children in care today just have no one and nowhere to turn to. And if they should happen to tell the families, like when I first saw my grandson, he was so badly bruised, and then I never saw him for a year because I complained. So it's bringing the social workers and social services to account. And it's no use the bloody government saying, oh, well, this committee will have a look at it and that. All those committees are living in another planet, and I've always said to governments and to everyone, you must listen to the nation. It's the people in the nation who know the truth, and this is where it is. But they don't want to listen to us because our children worldwide in the system is billions and billions and billions of pounds. They're one of the biggest industries worldwide and creating millions of jobs. So it's the social workers who are so bent and hooky and are supplying the foster agencies, with children so that the foster agencies are making millions of pounds a year. I have the research.
Exactly the same is going to happen in Ireland, because we have the situation now, Maggie, where parents can decide best interests for their children. We were talking about this earlier, and what's going to happen is that if this referendum is passed, then the state will, in every case, decide best interest, not just in exceptional cases, but the state will decide in every case, because that's currently what's happening.
Yeah, but what's going to happen,
Joe,
is the people en masse have to take back their lives. They have to stop what's going to be happening in Ireland. I always say, and the easiest thing to say to all the people in the nation, most people fart and they go to the doctors for a pill. And it's the same with whatever, they go to social services. The nation are giving their lives and their children's lives away because they won't stand up and speak for the children. And in Ireland, in Southern Ireland, these people have got to come out and march. They've got to stand up and fight. I wish I could get over there. My God, would I stand up and shout. That's all.
What I want to happen is, by the end of this debate, I haven't been given much of an opportunity to debate with anybody yet. By the end of this, which is going to be the 10th of November, I want the people of Ireland to know what is happening in the system is that, and what their intention is. Instead of having 6,000 children in the care of the state, they want every child in the whole state to be basically in the care of the state, because the state is going to decide. And what I want people to realize is that what is happening, people should be crying out for Ryan Report 2 to expose what is happening to these children. We were talking about this earlier, that what you have a situation that when a child is in care, the state vindicates for them. But what happens is that because it's usually the state that abuses the child to begin with, that what happens is the two sides appear before a judge, and on one side you have the state appearing to vindicate for the child on one side, but then you have the state opposing the child on the other side. That's why the stories that you told me, and I've heard those stories as well, is that when all of this happens in care, nobody knows about it. It's all covered up. That when social services only investigate themselves, this is exactly what's happening in Ireland. So,
well, it's up to the Irish people to come out and stop it. If they don't come out and things happen to their children, then they've got to take the blame.
Well, I honestly believe that, like, there's an awful lot of political spin. The politicians in Ireland, the journalists in Ireland, believe that this is going to be a slam dunk, that everybody's going to vote yes. The fact is that we are already ahead in the polls before we even began. That we will take all of their dishonest arguments. We will fight every opportunity where they're trying to suppress democracy, and we will get the story out to the people. And by the time voting time comes around, the Irish public should be so outraged that they're calling for Ryan Report 2 to expose this system. This has to happen because children are being harmed, and nobody knows what goes on.
Sold is the word. Sold
exactly.
is the word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's not make it any worse than what it is by voting yes. This has to stop. The light has to shine into the system, and children have to stop being abused by this system.
And the people and the nations have got to learn to stand up like they're doing in all the countries around the world. My God, I never thought I'd see Egypt do what they've done, because I lived there for many years, on and off. But it's fantastic how they've risen up. This country's got to do the same. Ireland's got to do the same.
Yeah.
If you don't, then the children will continue to be sold, massacred, and God knows what.
It's the last nail in the coffin for the Irish public. If they can take away their rights to, they've taken our banks, they've taken our homes, they've taken everything, and the last thing that they want is the rights to our children. It's just not going to happen. We cannot let that happen.
Not being funny, Joe, but it's part. I always say this is a part of the New World Order. They're trying to control everything: your money, your kids, your wife, your partner, your mind, the whole lot.
Andy, it's called the World Population Control, and they are controlling the population with children en masse now. That's what they're doing.
That's right.
Children are used for drugs. You name it, they're used for it. And we, the nation, we have no control. We have to take it back. So Ireland being the last stand sort of thing, for God's sake, stand up there. Fight for your kids.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, on that note, Maggie, thanks for coming on. We'll have you on again, darling. Andrew, Joe, and Kev.
Thank you.
See you again very, very shortly. You've been listening to the Earth News Rebel Show with me, Andy Peacher, and Kevin Ball. The show will be on again Friday night between 7 and 9, our regular slot, and 6 to 8 on a Sunday. Just ask Paul if we can come on Wednesday, waiting for that reply. So good night and God bless, and hope Ireland votes no.
You're listening to Critical Mass Radio. Now it's our turn.